Quick question before we start. Picture a steakhouse. A plate comes out, medium rare, a little char on the edges, steam still coming off it. You cut in. Before you even taste it, your brain already knows this is going to be good. That's a cow. Nobody at the table thinks twice about it. Now picture the same plate, same seasoning, same fork in your hand, except this time it's lion. Something in you just flinched a little, didn't it? And here's the annoying part. You probably can't even explain why. It won't kill you. It's not banned everywhere, but some alarm went off in your head before you even had time to think about it. So that's the question I want to answer today. Why don't we eat meat eater? We eat cows, pigs, chickens, deer, rabbit, basically anything that eats plant. But lion, wolf, tiger, eagle, completely off the table. Not expensive, but doable off the table. Just off. And here's the strange part. This isn't one country's weird rule that everyone copied. This shows up in cultures that never even met each other. So something bigger is going on. And before you think this is some modern squeamish thing, it isn't. Humans have hunted for almost our entire existence. We are very comfortable killing an animal and eating it. So the fact that we all drew the exact same line at the exact same place without ever talking to each other is genuinely strange. Nobody held a meeting about this. Nobody sent a memo. And yet here we are, all agreeing that a lion steak is somehow a bridge too far. I went into this thinking I already knew the answer. I figured predator meat must just be dangerous somehow. Simple as that. Turns out I was only partly right, and the real answer is a lot strange. So let's go through this properly, one idea at a time, because watching each theory almost work and then fall apart is honestly the fun part. Also, quick heads up, none of these ideas is the full answer by itself. That's actually the whole point of this video, so don't get attached to the first one that sounds convincing. Keep listening, because each one gets knocked down a little by the next. Idea 1, safety. Maybe predator meat is just dangerous to eat. This is the obvious guess, and there's real logic behind it. Every animal picks up bad stuff during its life. Parasites, heavy metals, bacteria. Let's just call it junk for now. When one animal eats another, it doesn't just get calories. It also inherits all that junk. If something eats that animal too, it inherits everything, plus whatever it already had. So the theory goes like this. The more animals something eats, the more junk ends up in its body. And this isn't just a guess. There's a real case that proves the point. Back in the 1960s, scientists noticed bald eagles near the Great Lakes were dying in huge numbers. It turned out they weren't being poisoned directly. They were just eating fish like normal. But those fish had spent their whole lives soaking up tiny traces of a pesticide called DDT, traces that came from everything smaller than them in the water. By the time that DDT reached the eagles, it had built up so much that their eggshells were turning thin. The shells cracked before the babies could even hatch. The eagles weren't dying from what they ate. They were dying from everything their food had already eaten before them. So safety is real, but here's the catch. We don't actually have solid proof that this is a big problem for humans eating carnivores in general. A few specific animals, sure, but not the whole category. So safety explains part of it, not all of it. And that's kind of a running theme with this whole topic. Every time you find a piece of evidence, it turns out to only apply to some animals, not all of them. Nature loves exception. It almost never gives you a clean, universal rule with zero cracks in it. Keep that in mind because it's going to happen again in a minute. And it's not just heavy metals either. There's a second, grosser kind of danger: parasite. Predators eat raw meat constantly. Over time, that's turned their bodies into a comfortable home for parasites built specifically for that lifestyle. The most famous one is called trichinella. It lives inside muscle tissue. If a person eats undercooked meat that's infected, the larvae hatch inside the gut and travel straight into the person's own muscle. That causes swelling, fever, and serious pain. In old cases, it even killed people. Bear meat is one of the most well-known sources of this, and bear is actually one of the few big predators humans have eaten throughout history. Every culture that hunted bear learned the same lesson fast. Cook it all the way through, not for the taste, for survival. So yes, safety is a real reason. It's just carrying 2 bags instead of 1. Toxins in one hand, parasites in the other. And even both together don't fully explain the whole story. There's a simple way to picture why this danger builds up so fast. Think about forwarding a text message. You send it to 10 friends. Each of them forwards it to 10 more friends. After just a few rounds, that one message has reached thousands of people. Nobody planned that. It just multiplied one hop at a time. Toxins move up a food chain the exact same way. Nobody dumps a huge dose into an eagle directly. The risk just keeps getting passed up and multiplied at every single step. By the time it reaches the top, it's not just a little work. It's often thousands of times worse. Moving on to idea 2, taste. Maybe predator meat just doesn't taste good. And honestly, this might be the most relatable theory here because most of our food choices really do come down to taste. There are 2 solid points in favor of this one. First, texture. Predators are lean and built for hunting. That means less soft fat and tougher muscle, and tougher meat usually isn't what people are craving. Second, flavor. What an animal eats changes how it tastes. That's the whole reason people care whether beef is grass-fed or grain-fed. So maybe eating other animals just makes meat taste worse somehow. And there's actual evidence for this. People who've eaten bear, say spring bear, which mostly eat berry, taste way better than fall bear, which mostly eat fish. Same animal, very different taste, all because of diet. But here's where this theory falls apart. Fish. A huge number of fish we eat are pure carnivore. They only eat other animals, and they taste great. Salmon, tuna, swordfish, none of these are considered gross. If carnivore equals bad taste were actually true, we'd expect people to avoid these too. We don't. So taste alone doesn't explain it either. And let's be honest, humans will eat almost anything if it's cooked well. We eat fermented shark. We eat century eggs buried in ash for weeks. Some cultures eat things that sound completely wild out loud. So it just doesn't taste good, feels like too polite of an answer for a species that will eat a live octopus for fun. Also, taste is something you can get used to. People eat things today that their grandparents would have found disgusting. Spicy food, blue cheese, sushi. Taste changes with exposure and culture. If predator meat really tasted that bad, you'd expect at least a few cultures somewhere to have developed a taste for it, the same way some cultures learned to love foods that outsiders find strange. But that mostly didn't happen, which tells you taste alone probably isn't running the show. Idea 3, and this one actually surprised me the most. It's inefficient. This isn't about danger or taste at all, it's just about math. There's a rule in ecology called the 10% rule, and once you learn it, you can't unsee it anywhere in nature. Every time energy moves up a food chain, about 90% of it disappears. A blade of grass captures sunlight, a deer eats that grass, but the deer only keeps about 10% of that energy as body. The rest just gets burned off, keeping the deer alive and moving. Now a lion eats the deer. Same tax applies again. 10% kept, 90% gone. So if you feed a cow 10,000 calories of grass, you end up with about 1,000 calories of beef. That's basically 2 steaks. Now feed that beef to a tiger instead of a person. You only get about 100 calories of usable tiger meat back. It's way more efficient and way less dangerous to just eat the beef yourself and skip the tiger entirely. Think of it like money. Imagine every time $100 changed hands, 90% of it just vanished. No explanation, just gone. You'd stop passing that money around fast. You'd want to spend it early before it lost most of its value. That's exactly what happens with energy in a food chain. A lion is basically money that's already changed hands twice. By the time it reaches your plate, it's worth about 1% of what it started as. Nobody makes that trade once they actually see the numbers. This theory also lines up with the fish exception we already found. That same energy loss happens in the ocean too. A predator fish is just as inefficient as a predator on land, but humans mostly just caught fish that were already there instead of raising them from scratch. So the inefficiency never really cost us anything, which is exactly why the whole no carnivores rule quietly breaks down the second you step into the ocean. It's worth sitting with that for a second, because it flips the whole story around. This isn't really about lions being scary or gross, it's about a simple energy budget. Every step up food chain costs you almost everything you started. Humans figured that out long before anyone had the word calorie. They just noticed that hunting predators took way more effort for way less food, and after enough close calls and wasted hunts, that lesson stuck. It didn't need to be written down. It just needed to work. Before we wrap up, there's one more layer worth mentioning. It's not really its own theory, it's more like something running underneath all 3 we've already covered. Humans seem to have a built-in dislike of eating predator meat, and it shows up before anyone even teaches it to us. Researchers studying food psychology have found this reaction in kids who've never been taught the reasoning behind it, and it shows up across cultures that had zero contact with each other. A psychologist named Paul Rosen spent decades studying disgust as an emotion. He found that people treat predator meat as deeply unappetizing on what he called a pre-rational level, meaning your gut reacts before your brain even finishes forming an opinion, which is honestly a little humbling. You'd like to think your food choices come from careful reason, but a huge chunk of what you will and won't eat was decided before you could even talk, running on instincts installed by people who died thousands of years before you were born. Try this for a sec. Picture your favorite meal. Now picture eating it while someone describes in detail exactly how it was made. For most foods, that description description makes you hungrier. But for a small number of foods, hearing too much detail actually kills your appetite. That's disgust doing its job in real time. It's not really about logic. It's a switch that flips before you get a vote. And it's not just humans either. Watch enough wildlife footage and you'll notice predators in the wild show way less interest in eating other predators, even when the meat is just sitting there free. No hunting required. It's like this same warning gets flagged across species that never shared a single piece of information with each other. When a pattern shows up that consistently across that many unrelated animals, it's not really a coincidence anymore. It's a rule nature keeps enforcing on its own. You can even see hints of this in your own reactions to smaller things. Ever notice how some smells make you gag before you even know what they are? Rotten food, certain chemicals, spoiled milk. Nobody sits you down and teaches you that spoiled milk smells bad. Your body just knows. It reacts first and explains later, if it ever explains at all. The instinct against eating predator meat seems to work the exact same way. It's not a rule you learned. It's a rule you were born with. Which brings us to the last idea, religion. Judaism doesn't allow eating predators. The Quran bans eating animals with fangs or talons, which rules out most meat eaters. And it's actually pretty common for behaviors to start as religious rules, then slowly spread into everyday culture long after people forget the original reason. So it's likely humanity's general avoidance of predators followed this exact path. But here's the twist. Religion probably isn't a separate reason at all. It's more like a written down version of the first three. If predator meat felt risky, it makes sense that a community would eventually turn that into a formal rule. If people had already developed a taste aversion or a gut-level disgust, that could easily turn into scripture over enough generations too. So religion isn't idea 4 standing on its own. It's probably ideas 1, 2, and 3, just wearing older language and given the weight of tradition. You can even see this pattern outside of formal religion. In Old Norse tradition, wolves weren't seen as food. They were treated more like omens, something to fear and respect, not something to cook for dinner. In parts of historical China, tiger meat shows up in old texts mostly as medicine, eaten in tiny symbolic amounts, almost like a ritual instead of a meal. Different continents, different centuries, no contact with each other, and somehow the same instinct kept showing up. When a culture runs into a big predator, the reaction is almost never, let's eat this regularly. It's caution, it's respect, it's avoidance. There's also a simpler, more everyday version of the same pattern, one you've probably lived through yourself without noticing. Think about how most families have small, unspoken food rules that nobody ever explains. Maybe nobody in your house eats meat on a certain day. Maybe there's a food your grandmother always avoided, and you avoid it too, without really knowing why. Rules like that rarely start as random preferences. Usually, somewhere far back, there was a real reason. Sickness, scarcity, something practical. And over enough generations, the reason gets forgotten, but the rule sticks around anyway, because it still feels right. That's basically what happened with predator, just stretched out across an entire species instead of one family. So where does that leave? Honestly, a little bit everywhere, and I think that's actually the most interesting answer. Safety plays a real role, but it doesn't explain everything. Taste plays a role, but fish break the theory completely. Inefficiency is probably the strongest explanation on paper, and it's the only one that actually predicts the fish exception correctly. And running underneath all of it, there's a gut-level disgust response built by ancestors who never read a single science paper, but somehow still got the right answer, just by surviving long enough to pass that feeling down. Nobody's running one big study to settle this for good, so we don't get one clean textbook answer. We get 4 overlapping ones, each explaining a slice of the picture, and none of them explaining the whole thing alone. And maybe that's actually a more satisfying answer than one tidy reason would have been. It means the cow on your plate tonight isn't the result of one clever rule someone figured out. It's the leftover result of thousands of years of overlapping pressures. Chemistry, calories, taste buds, and gut instinct all quietly agreeing on the same answer, from completely different directions without ever comparing notes. Think about how strange that actually is. 4 completely different forces. Chemistry doesn't know about religion. Calories don't care about disgust. Taste buds have never read a single sentence of scripture. And yet all 4 of them, working completely alone, ended up pointing at the exact same conclusion. That's not really a coincidence at that point. That's just what happens when reality only leaves room for one sensible answer, no matter which direction you approach it from. It also says something funny about how confident we all are about our food choice. Most people have never once questioned why steak feels normal and lion doesn't. It's just background knowledge, filed away next to the sky is blue, and don't touch the stove. But that quiet confidence you feel about dinner tonight, that's not really you making a decision. That's the end result of an argument that's been running in the background of our species for longer than farming has existed. And it settled so completely that it doesn't even feel like an argument anymore. It just feels like common sense. And honestly, that might be the most interesting part of all this. We usually assume the biggest mysteries are the exotic, space, the deep ocean, ancient ruins buried somewhere far away. But here's one that's been sitting on your dinner plate the whole time, hiding behind something as boring as a Tuesday night steak. And most of us have gone our entire lives without ever asking it out loud. So next time you're staring at a steak and for some reason your brain wanders to, could I eat a lion instead? You'll know exactly why the answer shows up before you even finish the thought. It's not one reason. It's every reason, stacked on top of each other, wearing a gut feeling as a disguise. And maybe next time you sit down to eat, that plate will look just a little different to you. Not a lion in sight, obviously, just a quiet reminder that even the most boring parts of your day carry an old, hidden story underneath them if you're willing to actually ask the question.